I'm Zach Johnson, also known as the Millennial Farmer.
They didn't grow up around agriculture, they don't understand a lot about it, and now they can see it from an inside view.
The biggest thing I would hope to get across is just highlight the fact that farmers are people, and we are still...
Most people... There's a particular kind of authenticity that audiences can sense immediately and cannot be manufactured no matter how large the production budget or how carefully the content strategy is constructed. It either exists or it does not. And when it exists in someone who also happens to be genuinely good at communicating, the result can build an audience that no algorithm would have predicted and no media executive would have greenlit in a pitch meeting. Zach Johnson of the Millennial Farmer YouTube channel is exactly that kind of creator, and the story of what has actually happened to him and his channel over the past several years is far more interesting and far more substantial than the simple narrative of a farmer who learned to use a camera. Understanding where he came from, what he built, why it resonated the way it did, and where things genuinely stand right now reveals something true about what people are actually looking for when they spend their time watching someone else work. Zach Johnson farms in Candiotty County in west central Minnesota on land that has been his family for generations. That detail matters more than it might initially seem, because the generational dimension of what he does is woven into almost everything about how he approaches his work and how he talks about it on camera. He did not arrive at farming as a lifestyle choice or a back-to-the-land experiment. He grew up in it, learned it from people who learned it before him, and took on the responsibility of continuing something that carries a weight of family history in every decision made about which fields to plant, which equipment to invest in, and how to manage the financial pressures that modern agriculture places on operations of every size. Row crop farming in Minnesota means corn and soybeans primarily, and it means working within the rhythms of seasons that do not negotiate with anyone's schedule or preferences. Planting happens when the ground is ready. Harvest happens when the crop is ready. Everything else adjusts around those realities. He launched the Millennial Farmer channel on YouTube in 2018, and the timing intersected with a moment when the platform was beginning to demonstrate that audiences had genuine appetite for long-form, process-oriented content that showed real work being done by real people in real circumstances. The channel's early videos were straightforward in concept. Zach took a camera into the field and showed people what farming actually looks like from the inside, not the romanticized version that appears in advertising, and not the crisis-focused version that appears in news coverage when commodity prices collapse or weather events destroy crops. The version that exists between those two extremes, which is most of what farming actually is: the daily decisions, the equipment maintenance, the planning conversations, the moments when something goes wrong and has to be figured out on the spot, the physical reality of managing thousands of acres through weather patterns that change faster than forecasts can track. That version of farming had not been particularly well represented in any media format before creators like Zach started putting cameras in their cabs and uploading the footage. What separated his channel from the beginning was not production quality, which was initially modest, but voice. Zach Johnson on camera is the same person Zach Johnson appears to be off camera, which sounds like a low bar, but is actually one of the harder things to achieve in content creation. He does not perform enthusiasm, he does not feel. He does not simplify complex situations to make them more digestible at the expense of accuracy. When something is genuinely difficult or genuinely uncertain, he says so, and he works through the difficulty or uncertainty on camera rather than editing it out and presenting only the resolved version. That approach creates a viewing experience that feels participatory rather than observational, as though the audience is accompanying him through the process rather than watching a finished product after the fact. Farmers who watch recognize the authenticity immediately. People who had never farmed a single acre in their lives and had no particular prior interest in agriculture found themselves genuinely engaged with the question of whether the planet was going to get finished before the rain arrived or whether the combine breakdown in the middle of harvest was going to get resolved before the crop deteriorated. The specificity of the problems turned out to be an asset rather than a barrier. His subscriber count grew steadily rather than explosively, which is actually the more durable growth pattern for channels built on consistent long-form content rather than viral moments. By the time the channel had been running for a few years, it had accumulated hundreds of thousands of subscribers, a number that continued climbing as more people discovered it through recommendations, and the YouTube algorithm began recognizing that viewers who started watching tended to keep watching. The agricultural content community on YouTube, sometimes referred to informally as AgTube, develop around channels like his, and Zach became one of the more recognizable figures within it. Someone whose work was referenced by other creators and whose perspective on farming topics carried genuine credibility within the community. The channel also expanded beyond purely field-based content as it developed. Zach incorporated videos about farm business decisions, equipment purchases, conversations about agricultural economics and policy, and content that addressed the broader context in which modern family farming operates. Those videos demonstrated that the channel was never simply about the visual spectacle of large machinery working large fields, though that element remained consistently popular with audiences. It was about the thinking behind the decisions, the financial calculations that determine whether a farming operation remains viable across generations, and the human dimension of sustaining a way of life that carries enormous cultural significance while operating within economic conditions that make sustainability genuinely difficult. Conversations about land costs, input prices, commodity markets, and the structural pressures facing mid-sized family operations gave the channel substance that extended well beyond what any single planting or harvest season could contain. One of the more significant developments in his public presence came through his relationship with other agricultural content creators and with the broader community that had formed around that content. Collaborations, cross-channel appearances, and a general ecosystem of creators who were documenting farming life across different regions and different types of operations gave Millennial Farmer context that made it feel like part of something larger than a single channel. Zach participated in that community genuinely rather than purely strategically, which reinforced the same quality that had made his own channel work in the first place. Authenticity at that scale tends to compound rather than dilute. He also developed a merchandise line and other revenue streams that extended the business dimension of what the channel had become, which is a natural evolution for creators who build substantial audiences, but also reflects something specific about his situation. Farming is an economically precarious occupation, even for operations that are well managed and well established. The channel created income streams that operate alongside the farming operation rather than replacing it, and Zach has been transparent about the financial realities of both the farming side and the content creation side in ways that made the business dimension of what he does part of the educational content rather than something separate from it. Young people interested in farming or in content creation or in the intersection of the two found genuine information in his discussion of how those economics actually work. The question of what has actually happened to the channel and to Zach Johnson in the period leading into 2025 and 2026 is one that requires honest engagement with both the positive trajectory and the genuine challenges that come with building something substantial on a platform whose rules and algorithms are entirely outside the creator's control. YouTube as a platform has changed significantly since 2018 in ways that affect every creator who built their audience during that earlier period. The recommendation patterns that drove discovery have shifted. The competitive landscape for agricultural content specifically has grown considerably as more creators enter the space that channels like Millennial Farmer helped establish. Maintaining growth and engagement in that environment requires constant adaptation, and the creators who manage it successfully tend to be the ones who stay connected to the authentic core of what made their channel work rather than chasing format trends that do not fit their actual content. Zach has continued farming and continued documenting it, which is the most fundamental answer to the question of what happened to him. The seasons keep coming, the work keeps demanding to be done, and the camera keeps going along for the process. There have been difficult seasons, as there always are in farming, where weather or market conditions or equipment failures created challenges that played out on camera exactly as they played out in reality. Those difficult seasons have consistently produced some of the channel's most watched and most discussed content, because the authenticity of watching someone navigate genuine difficulty is more compelling than watching things go smoothly, and because the audience that has followed the channel across multiple seasons has developed a genuine investment in the outcome of each new challenge. His family has remained part of the channel story in ways that add dimension to what would otherwise be purely operational content. His wife Becky and their children appear in videos and represent the family context within which all the farming decisions are being made. That family dimension connects the agricultural content to questions about legacy and continuity that resonate well beyond the specific circumstances of one farming operation in Minnesota. The question of what gets passed down and how, and whether the next generation wants to receive it is one that many viewers find genuinely meaningful regardless of whether they have any personal connection to farming. Zach and Becky welcome their fourth child, adding another chapter to the family story that the channel's long-term audience has followed across years of content. What genuinely surprises people who encounter the Millennial Farmer story for the first time, particularly people who assume that YouTube's success in a niche category translates automatically into departure from the thing that created success, is that Zach Johnson is still farming the same land he was farming when he started the channel. He did not use the channel's success as an exit ramp from agriculture into full-time media. He did not relocate to a larger market or reformat the channel around a more broadly commercial premise. The farming is not a backdrop for the content. The content is a document of the farming, and that relationship has remained consistent across every season the channel has operated through. That consistency is rarer than it sounds in the creator economy, where the pressures to scale, to pivot, and to optimize for growth metrics push many creators away from the authentic core that built their audience in the first place. The channel passed 1 million subscribers, a milestone that represents genuine cultural reach for content built around the specific realities of Midwestern row crop farming. That number means that more than 1 million people chose to consistently follow the work of one farming family in west central Minnesota, which is a remarkable statement about what audiences will engage with when the content is real and the person delivering it can be trusted. The vast majority of those subscribers have no direct personal experience with the kind of farming Zach does. They watch because he gives them honest access to a world that is consequential, physically demanding, economically complex, and almost entirely invisible in mainstream media coverage except when something goes catastrophically wrong. What really happened to Zach Johnson from the Millennial Farmer channel is that he kept farming and kept filming and kept being honest about both, which turns out to have been exactly the right approach for building something that lasts. In a media environment that rewards novelty and spectacle and constant reinvention, he built his audience by doing the opposite, by returning to the same fields in every season and documenting what the land and the weather and the market required of him with the same straightforward candor that characterized his very first videos. The surprise, if there is one, is simply that it worked as well as it did and continued working as long as it has. But perhaps that is not really a surprise at all. Perhaps it is exactly what happens when someone who is genuinely good at something and genuinely honest about it finds the right format and refuses to abandon it for something easier or more immediately lucrative. The result is a channel that feels less like content and more like a record, a sustained and honest document of what it actually takes to farm in America in the 21st century, made by someone who has no reason to make it look like anything other than what it is.